On Tuesday evening, videos and images of a large explosion in the centre of Beirut started appearing on social media, and soon these began to appear in the news. It was clear that this explosion had been associated with a huge loss of life, many injuries, and the destruction of homes and businesses. People wanted answers about how such an explosion happened and who was responsible. We're writing this video the day after the explosion, when we know more than we did about it last night. But by no means does this mean we have all the information. It is fully possible that some of the information presented in this video may have changed by the time this is published, and if so, we will let you know either in a pinned comment or in the description. It is important that at this time, information is up to date and accurate. So, in this video, we're going to attempt to explain what happened, based on what we currently know, the current political and geopolitical context, and how that is relevant to this crisis. In the description, you can also find a list of the charities supporting those impacted by this tragedy. So, if you can donate, the links are there. We will also donate any money from this video to these charities. So firstly, what happened? According to Lebanese President Michel Aoun, the explosion was caused by 2,750 tons of poorly stored ammonium nitrate. Ammonium nitrate is used either as a fertilizer or as an explosive. Lebanese authorities have suggested that the chemical was seized from a ship 6 or 7 years ago and has been stored in a warehouse ever since. This seems to be backed up by a counter-terrorist bomb disposal operator who told Sky News that the explosion does not appear to have been caused by gunpowder or ammunition, which contradicts any claim that the explosion was deliberate. There definitely have been some claiming that the explosions were intentional, including President Trump, but these claims run counter to what the Lebanese government has been saying. So based on current information, it appears that this was an accident caused by an unsafe storage of ammonium nitrate. The Lebanese Prime Minister, Hassan Diab, said, "I will not relax until we find the responsible party for what happened, hold it accountable, and apply the most serious punishments against it, because it isn't acceptable that a shipment of ammonium nitrate, estimated to be 2,750 tons, was in a depot for the past 6 years without precautionary measures being taken." He has also said those responsible will pay a price for this catastrophe, and that this is a promise to the martyrs and wounded people. This is a national commitment. Clearly, the Prime Minister is certain that whoever allowed such large quantities of ammonium nitrate to be left without the proper precaution for a number of years will be found and prosecuted. This explosion has already had a profound effect on the country, not only in the huge loss of life so far, but also economically. The explosion was so large that people in Cyprus could feel it, over 100 miles away. The Cypriot authorities were even put on standby only minutes after the explosion occurred. This goes to show just how massive this explosion was. In terms of economic loss, it has been suggested that the explosion has damaged half the city of Beirut, causing what is predicted as $3 billion worth of damage, according to the governor of Beirut. He has also claimed that the number of homeless in Beirut is now close to 300,000, though it is unclear whether this means people living on the streets or those whose homes have been destroyed. In addition to this, it has been estimated that 90% of the hotels in Beirut have been destroyed. The governor had even more to say in this emotional interview.
هيدي يعني مصيبة على لبنان، يعني ما بنعرف كيف بدنا نطلع منها، ما بنعرف بهالأيام نحن كنا يا دوب نقدر نمشي. بس كتير هالقد كتير فرد مرة على شعب. بناشد الشعب اللبناني إنه يتماسك. نحن أقوياء وبدنا نضل أقوياء.
In addition to this, hospitals have also been overwhelmed. The explosion happening during a global pandemic also makes things more difficult for hospitals. This means that hospitals have to try and deal with the fallout from this explosion while trying to separate coronavirus patients from those affected by this blast. It is easy when talking in such big numbers to lose sight of the human element to this. The Independent has reported a story of a trainee medic in Beirut called Nashat helping to pull the corpse of his friend from out of the rubble. This just puts into perspective how hellish the last few days have been for people in Beirut. Due to the influx of patients and the fact that hospitals are overwhelmed, hospitals in Israel and Cyprus have offered to take patients in, and the EU is currently looking into what it can do. Firstly, it is looking at sending over 100 firefighters and vehicles and some sniffer dogs to detect people who are trapped under the rubble. It will also use its satellites to map the situation in order to aid the Beirut authorities. This is all on top of the aid that is being promised from around the world. Australia has committed $2 million for humanitarian aid to help Lebanon, with it being split between the UN World Food Programme and the Red Cross. Britain has been looking at providing either technical or financial aid. France has also offered aid, and French President Emmanuel Macron is travelling to Beirut on Thursday to offer his support. This crisis has shown that the world will come together when tragedies such as this one occur. Israel, who are technically still at war with Lebanon, has offered support and help, and even the use of their hospitals. The explosion in Lebanon, though, comes at a particularly difficult time for the country. Firstly, the value of its currency is in freefall. Since September, the lira has lost 85 to 90% of its value. Buying power in Lebanon has effectively disappeared, with many businesses refusing to accept credit cards as they fear the banks will simply not transfer them the money. It has even been reported that some people have reverted to the barter system through the use of Facebook groups. Before the explosion this week, people were showing their anger at the ruling class for letting the economic crisis happen. There were protests in April against the government, which were a continuation of protests over the last year. Last October, protests were held against the government for proposing to tax WhatsApp. This would have meant citizens had to pay the equivalent of £4.50 a month to use WhatsApp. This demonstrates the problems that the government had with the economy. No government would attempt to charge to use a globally free app unless it felt it had to, and with an unemployment rate of around 25%, a debt to GDP ratio of 150%, and around 1/3 of the population living below the poverty line, it can be understood why the government enacted such strange taxation policies. This is not to say that these policies are right, or that we agree with them, but it highlights that the government felt they needed to consider the economic situation of the country. These riots have partly been motivated by the poor economic situation, but also the fact that while Lebanon has been struggling with their economic position, those in power have been accruing wealth. Last month, it was reported that the coronavirus pandemic was pushing Lebanon even further into crisis. Power was being cut by the government and limited to only 2 hours a day, which meant that babies being born and put in incubators were having to rely on backup generators, the reliability of which is questionable. Those who live under the poverty line were set to increase to 60% by the end of the year, and that was before the explosion this week. Even prior to the explosion, hospitals were pushed to the brink of collapse by coronavirus, with serious shortages of PPE being reported. We can only imagine the difficulties hospitals are facing right now. So, we are asking you now to donate to help with the crisis if you're able to. All of these charities are linked in the description. As we said earlier in this video, all money made from this video will be sent to some of these charities.